So last time I was talking about the flaming chariot. Um, that's just one example. Another example would be um, like in the first few verses of the Bible when the Bible is talking about in the beginning, um, God moved over the face of the waters and over the expand of the abyss, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but and the earth was disorderly, and things like that. But I come to the terms the earth was disorderly, was past tense. The earth elements have already been created. Why? Because the composition of the earth is made up of various compounds. Not only that, but the first elements created by the Big Bang were helium, hydrogen, helium-4, deuterium, tritium, and helium-3. Those are the predominant four, with mm, arguments here and there of lithium being created. But my point through that is that there has been, from what we as scientists and scientific community and physicists have determined the age of the universe to be somewhere around 83 billion, if I remember correctly. That's totally up in the air. I don't remember accurately, but we can determine the age of the universe. So just by that statement, I can tell that this beginning of the Bible as a story, as a telling of, is well advanced in time, because the earth was disorderly. We're talking about the rest of the periodic table, and those elements found here on Earth have already been created. The cooling down process from one element to the next, I believe, and in certain parts, and it's hard for me to remember a lot of these facts, but somewhere around 380,000 years between the cooling down that occurred after the creation of helium-4 to the next occurrence where atoms begin to be formed. So my point of this whole ramble is that Earth was already created. The universe, stars, galaxies, black holes, all those unconceivable or hard conceived facts about the universe were there. In the beginning, it's more of a pin on the timeline of the universe where we become relevant as a species, where we become relevant in the story of who we are and who God is in our relationship to Him and with Him. So I don't think that we should be so arrogant as to assume that when the Bible says in the beginning, it's assuming in the beginning of God, in the beginning of things, of God, in the beginning of God's plan as a whole. I think it's referring in the beginning of God's plan of man, or in the beginning of the story of man in relation to God. Um, because that makes more sense to me, at least. Especially if we claim that God is eternal. I mean, if He is God, which I believe He is, and Godship then says that He is everlasting, and He was everlastingly before, and will continue to be everlastingly forever. Which means that time is of very little relevance when it comes to Him. But that's my grain of salt when it comes to creation. Um, so that's one of the things that it was relieving to understand at the time, because it didn't fight against. There's just there's just a little more light on that scene, at least to me, because I definitely did have problems with that. Another thing came later on with the whole evolution of men and the wind, evolution of men and archaeology, I would say, especially because the claim of man as a species dates further back than what the Bible genealogies date. So I always have this thing where, what's going on here? Is there some sort of conversion mistake between the genealogies, or the years lived, or what is this event going on here? How come how come the Bible describes, at least, the Bible doesn't claim how far back, but theologians and scholars make calculations based on genealogies in the time of one generation to the next generation, and the life of one man to the life of the next man, and they calculate the approximate time when Genesis was taking place. Um, in archaeology says something completely different. However, they do overlap in the cradle of human civilization as being the Middle East, and Jericho being like the first established town with walls and things of that nature. Um, but I took a class on world migrations, and interestingly, we started with the migration of primate species and their sort of journey from the woods in Africa before it had become a desert, um, to the hominids, which are essentially primates that walk on 2 feet. And because they were the smallest or medium smallest, in a nutshell, there's big giant forest expands almost 90% of Africa. Who has the advantage in this terrain? Well, the medium-sized primates who can maneuver freely through the woods, the smaller sized primates who can maneuver through the top branches of the woods, so they still have their own land because it's fragile. They can maneuver there. The middle monkeys or primates, sorry, can maneuver in the middle. The heavier ones, however, and it's tough for you to keep up with the pace and things of the sort whenever you don't have great control. So those primates were sort of at a disadvantage of the landscape, and they tended to be a little better on grasslands, and that's how they moved onto the grass. Became bipedal, whatever. One event leads to the next. You know, climate changes lead to the depletion of a certain species, forests shrink, etc., etc. And eventually you have Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals, and the species somehow intermixes, and then you begin to have intelligent designs of perceived religion through cave art, perceived religion through burial rituals and things of that nature. And there comes the argument here where, like, how does that tie in biblically? Like, why is there the disagreement? I'm no theologian and I'm no historian, but I am sort of a scientist. And the thing I see is that when when the word says that God created man in the image of himself, I'm not entirely 100% sure that he means our physical appearance, our biological function, our design structurally to be able to reproduce, to be able to grow, to be able to mature, to be able to age, to be able to pick up things mechanically and maneuver through our physical world. I don't think that's what he meant by the image of us, or himself, when he was talking to his other persons in the Trinity, which I will talk about the Trinity eventually. Um, I think he was referring to another property of himself, which, and I can't say for sure this is it, but it's a property of himself that we share in being able to perceive reality and being able to perceive emotion and to conceptualize things of the infinite and just our whole innate ability to comprehend. So I think that somewhere along the evolutionary timeline, there is such thing as a missing link because it's still missing. Here's my grain of salt. Somewhere along the timeline, at his will, he befitted to create men with the best physical characteristics to give him the land, to make him top dog of all species. But at the same time, the creation of his soul was made to the image of God. And I think the physical is of very little importance, especially because the Bible says that things are to be taken spiritually, not carnally. And I'll continue on that until next time.